I'm Diane Narraway, and I am the current Arladus of Clan Dolman, which really means the Lady of Clan Dolman. I was the chair before, but now I'm the lady, gone up in the world. Right, I'm going to talk to you today about wolves. Now, this is everything from initially looking at werewolves, and then looking at wolves as a totem and as an actual spiritual animal, and our kind of journey with them a bit, and how they featured. So, right, this particular talk is called Howling at the Moon. Dark clouds sweep across the night sky, tantalizingly revealing the full moon. And as the silver moonlight streams into the room, the anti-hero writhes and howls in agony as he, or indeed she, wrestles to suppress the inevitable change from human to beast. Now, this particular lycanthrope has become a familiar scene in film and television series for many years. Who could forget the iconic portrayal of the changing scene in An American Werewolf in London, paving the way for Dog Soldiers, Wolfman, and of course the legendary Thriller video from Michael Jackson. Yet, he, rather like the vampire, is as much a victim of his inhuman affliction as those he savages and indeed ravages. Wolf Dog Soldiers was a real favourite of mine. I loved that. Now, like the vampire, and this is probably about where it ends, his cursed affliction is passed on through the bite or even a scratch from one who's already infected, and which can, in the case of the werewolf, only be cured by a silver bullet. Now, similarly, they both have their roots in the magic of the ancient shaman. Now, the word werewolf comes from the Old English were, an adult male, and wolf. And while the word lycanthrope comes from the Greek lykos, wolf, and anthropos, man. Now, it's worth mentioning here that in the Middle Ages, when everyone was panicking about vampires, unlike vampires, werewolves are not dead. They're very much alive. And therefore, those who were allegedly afflicted by this, and there were plenty that were accused of it, quite a lot of them were also accused of witchcraft or middle-aged charge of witchcraftry, right? Because by turning from human to beast, they were shape-shifting and therefore practicing witchcraft. Now, and like I said, as many of you know, shape-shifting into animal form is a well-documented magical practice and can be used to explain a variety of mythical beasts, including the witch's familiar and totem animals. Now, throughout history, there are many records and trials of confessed or accused werewolves. In fact, they were hunted, questioned, and executed, as I said, quite often with the same charge as witchcraft. And if they didn't have that charge, they certainly had being a werewolf as a charge. Now, these so-called werewolf trials give us a historical glimpse at the rampant human belief in werewolves. Now, when you look back to the Middle Ages as well, where these werewolves are being persecuted, wolves were very much pack animals. And a lone wolf is the only one that's likely to attack. So these werewolves were seen as dangerous as a lone wolf. Because if you were a farmer and a lone wolf got into your sheep pen, you were going to be hungry that year. Now, the earliest recorded werewolf legend comes from one of the oldest known written works on the planet, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it's written in 2100 BC, and in it, Gilgamesh refuses to become the lover of the goddess Ishtar because of her cruel treatment towards her previous suitors. Ishtar allegedly turned one man, a shepherd, into a wolf, making him the enemy of his friends, his sheep, and even his own dogs. In 425 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus described the Nuri, a nomadic tribe of magical men who changed into wolf shapes for several days of the year. The Nuri were from Scythia, a land that is now part of Russia. And using wolf skins for warmth is not outside the realm of possibility for inhabitants of such a harsh climate. This is the likely reason Herodotus described their practice as transformation. But it is, like I said, in ancient Greece that we find the alleged origins of the word lycanthrope. It tells of an ancient king of Arcadia called Lycon, who served Zeus's dead son to him on a plate in order to test whether Zeus was truly omniscient. As a result, Zeus turned Lycon into a wolf, destroyed his children, and restored his own son to life. I think we can safely say that's a yes to Zeus's omniscience. A later passage recounting this event, entitled Ovid's Metamorphosis, written in 1 AD, gives us the only ancient source that goes into detail on the act of transformation. His description of the metamorphosis uses haunting language that creates a correlation between Lycon's behaviour and the physical manipulation of his body. He tried to speak, but his voice broke in two, etc., etc. So realistically, all we have of that is that sparse little account of how his voice broke in two, and it becomes more rasping, more howling, and his bones constrict. Equally possible that what they were witnessing was a seizure, but certainly enough to have somebody accused of being a werewolf. Now, like I said, the only wolf that is likely to attack your sheep, your livestock, is a lone wolf. And this is a wolf who has left its pack in search of a new one, either because it's been fought with or because the pack have died out, lost to the alpha male, no longer in charge, whatever. Now, these loner rogue wolves can display a tendency to be stronger and more aggressive, and as such, more dangerous. And this may be due to the difficulties faced by a lone wolf hunting large mammals in the wild, hence farms being raided, bringing the wolves closer to humans. Now, in amongst werewolves, we also find in antiquity the very, very familiar big bad wolf. Now, the big bad wolf is, there's kind of two sides to this. There's very obvious when you look at fairy tales that have the big bad wolf in it. It is always the big bad wolf, and the alleged possible victims, as generally they get away, are Little Red Riding Hood, the 3 little pigs, the 7 little kids, all of which are kind of like gobbled up by this wolf and either rescued or whatever. Little Red Riding Hood, the earliest tale of that, comes from a monk. And he tells the story of this little girl with a red cape who goes out into the woods and encounters wolf cubs. And she's obviously very, very afraid because she's only little. And you kind of get the gist that she is only about 5 or 6. And this preacher or this monk has made her this red cloak. So she refers to the wolf as little mice, and she says to them, "Oh, please, little mice, do not eat me, because my cloak my father has made," meaning God. So, she is protected. And the little wolves they leave her alone. And so she gets away. So that's the very earliest telling of Little Red Riding Hood. And you certainly see this idea that there is this particular predator that goes after little, i.e. paedophiles, etc., child killers. So children are being, parents initially with fairy tales are being warned to keep their children away from the words, away from danger, because there are these, evil predators out there, this big bad wolf. Now, over the years, the big bad wolf's kind of found its way into mainstream television with, I don't know if anybody saw The 10th Kingdom, with the wolf in that, who kind of transformed on a full moon and was a sort of a bit of a mixture between the big bad wolf and a werewolf and, you know, a cuddly kind of nice wolf. You know, but got the girl in the end because he was really underneath it all very nice. You've also got in Once Upon a Time, where the wolf was Red Riding Hood, or Red, as the case may be. There's also the other film, Red Riding Hood, isn't it, where she turns out to be the wolf, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of like taken all these twists into mainstream television. And I know that there is a book called Women Who Run with Wolves, and that looks at the concept that women, when they reach a certain age, are kind of these going through menstruation and the little red idea and all the rest of it, and becoming proper women and getting in touch with their own sexuality. And I know that there's kind of metaphors for the big bad wolf and all the rest of it in that. Initially there, I think we are looking at them as a warning. Now, one of the ones who gave rise to the big bad wolf story, and to some extent the lycanthrope story of the revenants of the Middle Ages, was a man called Peter Stumpf. Now, he was in a small Bavarian village. Now, at the time, when you look back at what life was like in a medieval village, you very much relied on members of your community. And the concept that, you know, these children were being killed and savaged in the woods was just a bit difficult for them to swallow, that it was actually a member of their community. So you assume that it must be this wolf, that there was a wild animal out there attacking children. When they finally caught up with this guy, Peter Stumpf, and he was only caught because I think somebody kind of oversaw him, is that word? Came across him with his stepdaughter being somewhat not very stepfatherly. And therefore, you know, he was taken in and tried and admitted to being a werewolf, you know, in a kind of, I guess, in his own way to excuse his behavior, but saying that he put this belt on once a month when the moon was full, and that's when he would attack children and so on, and it turned him into this wild beast. Well, however much the villagers might have wanted to believe that, they didn't. And so he was kind of found guilty and executed as a werewolf. And of course, like I say, because he'd had this belt, he was therefore practicing magic and using something that would transform him. And, you know, he became this forerunner. He was killed himself, he was executed himself as brutally as he ever did any of the kids. I mean, they actually put him on this spinning wheel where bits of him were just kind of ripped off, and then the remains were burned. His stepdaughter, because although, you know, we would look at her now and say, oh my God, she's a victim of this, you know, paedophile and she needs to be taken into protective care, they were more concerned that maybe he had passed that affliction on to her and she was therefore burned. So, you know, they were, yeah, the family of these people were, it's assumed that they would somehow be as bad. Quite often that was the case in witch trials, that children were then executed as well because they might just be as bad. There is another one who was tried as a werewolf and for witchcraftry at the time, and he features in a new book we're bringing out, which is based on the witch trials, and so you can read kind of all about him in there. Gilles Garnier. There wasn't much written about him, so it's quite an interesting story that's come up, but I will tell you about that more at the end. Now, to the Native Americans, the wolves were something different. They were the teacher. And like them, you know, people who work with wolves today believe we can learn quite a lot from their social structure and pack bonds. The native saying goes, when you see a wolf, he has seen you 1,000 times before. And many of the North American tribes featured the wolf in their legends, like the bear, as something to be emulated, representing strength, loyalty, and courage, all of which are attributes found in the successful hunter, and some tribes even feature a legend which tells how their forefathers were turned from wolves into humans. So when we go outside of mainstream medieval Europe, the wolf is being kind of revered in a different way. But that's because, you know, they have a different relationship with nature to what we did at the time. Medieval Europe was a very frightening place by all accounts. To the ancient Romans, without the she-wolf who suckled the volatile founder of Rome when he and his twin brother were abandoned by their parents. Now this she-wolf effectively became the surrogate mother of the Roman Empire, and it was undoubtedly somebody who provided the inspiration for Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book, which again, when you look at the Jungle Book, you look at wolves bringing up a child, having that pack element and that natural maternal bond almost to look after this human child, even though, you know, to some extent it would make good food. It's not something wolves are really about. Now, it's these qualities that have contributed to today's wolf finding a new home in the hearts and imaginations of pagans and spiritualists throughout the world as their totem animals and their spirit guides. We now look more at the spiritual connotations of the wolf, what it does, what it represents, how much we can emulate that creature. So you will see many of Clandolman wear furs, etc., in circle. And when you go into like more tribal countries where they're relying on their own spirituality and they have these shaman that are kind of leading the tribe, they are all wearing varying animal skins, some of which they are looking to emulate the behaviors. And, you know, something like the pack bonds of the wolf and the loyalty to each member of its own little pack is quite a thing to emulate. And that's where they were going with this. So to be considered, like have a wolf totem almost, or that'd be something to do with your spirit animal, that would be really important, really significant. You know, that pack element was an important thing. To some, it would be about walking between the worlds. If you're wearing the fur of a dead animal, then you are kind of stretching it. You're going between the worlds of life and death. That's the idea behind it, or some of. And when it comes to being between life and death and the wolf is out at night. It's got really exceptional vision for hunting, etc. Now, do wolves actually howl at the moon? No, they don't, not at all. I went to Reading Wolf Sanctuary and asked them. They spent a lot of time with wolves, and they said no, they do occasionally howl at sirens though. So anything that sounds maybe to them like a howl. So I think when you're looking at it, you're looking at maybe a lone wolf. And if I own a lone wolf on a clear night where there's no wind, the howl can travel miles. So this is where we get the idea that on a clear full moon night, yeah, the howling wolf. But no, they don't howl at the moon. However, having said that, humans almost do. Human behavior is very much governed by the moon. All witches know the phases of the moon are very significant. But when you consider that the moon affects the tides, why would it not affect us? And maybe other animals, because we are like all 90% water. And when you go around nightclubs and places like that, the door staff will say, yeah, there's greater lunacy, more fights, whatever, break out on a full moon. I've had my daughter phone me up, and she works in a mental health facility, and say, is it a full moon, Mum? Because they're really playing up in here. So humans do respond to phases of the moon, very much so. Some more than others, but very much so. Wolves, they don't howl at it. Right, okay. So today's wolves have found a new home in the hearts and imaginations of pagans and spiritualists throughout the world as their totem animals and spirit guides. And yet, despite the fact that we have a greater understanding of wolf behavior and indeed human psychology, we still kind of remain that bit fascinated by the werewolf. Whether through the ancient magic of the shaman or the vivid imagery of the horror stories, the wolf lives on in our imagination. Perhaps in the end, the werewolf is little more than a metaphor that brings to life the beast that lives in all of us. Now, as a wolf totem, I can tell you that the wolf represents new paths and journeys, intelligence, strength, ritualistic nature, and they are sociable. They represent the freedom to move within the realms of insights and attachments, the epitome of the wild spirit, the wisdom through freedom, and the wild hunt, all of which we're very familiar with. And so there we have it. The wolf in a little nutshell. Some of its bad behaviour, some of its good points. The plan is next year, when they let us all out of lockdown, I will come out and I'll have a full big talk to present at events next year on the wolf and all its aspects, and also the vampire in all their glory. Right, very, very quickly, before I go and leave you, like I said, we're bringing out a new book. Now, the idea behind this book, and we're very excited about it, and we're hoping that it will come out in the next week or two, is we took the witch trials, and bearing in mind that a lot of the witch trials are, the witches involved are nothing more than a name on a plaque or a list on Wikipedia. So we took a genuine witch, a genuine trial, and the genuine outcome. And where there was history attached to it, we used it. And the writers have mixed fact and fiction. There's several different writers and several different stories. And they've mixed fact and fiction to bring to life those who've kind of been lost to time. And like I say, nothing more than a little dash between their dates. Some of the witches we don't even know when they were born or when they died. Just there's a vague hint of a reference to them. Others we have more info. So if there was history available, we had to use it. And we mixed, like I said, fiction in with it to bring them to life. Now, what's significant about this is that we kind of did a lot of research on this and looked at it over time. And the witches in the book are listed chronologically. They are a mixture of male and female. They cover at least 3 continents that I can remember, and a good couple of thousand years. The earliest one we have is 300 BCE in ancient Greece, and the latest one we have is 2010 in Africa, which just goes to show that the burning times aren't quite over. So many of them, some of them escaped, some of them were executed, and kind of whether the witches were innocent or guilty, we left up to the writer to capture their imagination. Because I think, as Melissa Harrington says, nothing captures the mind more than the image of the witch. So we hope you'll come into that. So that's from Beneficia Publishing, which is my publishing company, and will be available in a couple of weeks. So please come, look us up. Come and look up Clan Dolman. They've got loads going on. And enjoy Witchfest. And hopefully see you next year when we're all out of this. Thank you.